Italy, 1972. A weekly news magazine hits the stands with a headline that stops the country in its tracks. Invented, a machine that photographs the past. On the cover, a grainy photograph. A face, eyes upturned in agony. The claim is staggering. This, according to the magazine, is the face of Jesus Christ at the moment of his crucifixion. But this isn't an ancient artifact. It's not a painting discovered in a forgotten tomb. According to the story, this image was captured by a device, a machine, a technological window into history itself. They called it the Chronovisor. And the man who built it was a Benedictine monk working in secret for the Vatican. If true, this would be one of the most revolutionary inventions in human history. A television set tuned to the past, a camera that could peer through time itself. But the Vatican has never confirmed the story. The device has never been seen. And the man who claimed to build it took most of his secrets to the grave. This is the story of the time machine the Vatican doesn't want you to know about. Father Pellegrino Ernetti was not a mad scientist. He was a respected scholar, a musicologist, an expert in sacred music and Gregorian chant. Born in 1925, he was also a man with an unusual interest, physics, the science of the material world, a rare combination for a Catholic priest in mid-20th century Italy. Those who knew him described him as brilliant, devout, but curious in ways that extended far beyond theology. His path to the Chronovisor allegedly began with a strange incident in the early 1950s. Ernetti was working on an audio research project at the Catholic University of Milan with a colleague, Father Agostino Gemelli. They were recording Gregorian chant. Routine work, technical, precise, but on one of the tapes, something impossible happened. Father Gemelli heard a voice. Not from the choir, not from anyone in the room. A voice from the past, his own father, long dead, speaking to him through the recording device. It was impossible, unsettling, inexplicable, but it planted an idea in Ernetti's mind, a question that would consume him 4 years. Could sounds from the past somehow linger? Could they be recovered? Could technology reach back through time and retrieve what was lost? Father Gemelli was no fringe figure. He was the president of the Pontifical Academy of Sciences, a man of considerable influence within the Church, and he was intrigued. Disturbed, perhaps, but intrigued. According to Ernetti, Gemelli helped him secure Vatican support, funding, permission, official blessing to explore this phenomenon scientifically. The Vatican, it seemed, wanted to know if the impossible was possible. Ernetti claimed he assembled a team. 12 experts, scientists, engineers, physicists, men whose names would never be publicly revealed, but in private conversations with his friend, Father Francois Brune, Ernetti dropped hints about who these collaborators might have been. Enrico Fermi, the Nobel Prize-winning physicist who built the first nuclear reactor, Wernher von Braun, the rocket engineer who would later pioneer America's space program, two of the greatest scientific minds of the 20th century, allegedly working in secret on a device that could view the past. If true, it was an astonishing collaboration, hidden from the world, funded by the Vatican, operating in complete secrecy somewhere in Italy. Neither Fermi nor von Braun ever publicly acknowledged involvement in such a project. Both men died without ever speaking of it, but their silence doesn't prove the project didn't exist. In matters of national security, of church secrecy, silence is often the rule. The team worked 4 years. Their hypothesis was radical but elegant. Every event that has ever occurred leaves behind an energy trace. Every sound, every image, everything that happens creates electromagnetic vibrations that radiate outward into space. Most of these signals are lost, scattered, drowned in the cosmic noise that fills the universe. But what if they could be recovered? What if a device could be built sensitive enough to detect these traces, to filter through the noise and reconstruct what was lost? It would be like tuning a radio, finding the right frequency, locking onto a signal from another time. This was the theory behind the Chronovisor. And according to Ernetti, they proved it worked. By the late 1950s, Ernetti claimed. The team had built a working prototype. It wasn't flashy. It looked like a large cabinet filled with electronics, cathode ray tubes, antennae, dials and switches. The kind of equipment you might find in any television repair shop of the era. But this was no ordinary television. The Chronovisor was built around specialized antennae made from exotic metal alloys, 3 mysterious metals, as Ernetti described them, designed to pick up electromagnetic remnants from specific moments in history. The operator could calibrate the device to a particular date, a particular location, even focus on a specific individual. The signals would be processed, amplified, reassembled into a visual image on a screen, with accompanying audio. It was a television set tuned to history itself. Ernetti described the first successful test with something approaching awe, the moment when the device came to life, when the screen flickered and shapes began to form, buildings, figures in ancient clothing, the past materializing before their eyes. If his account is true, they had achieved something impossible. They had opened a window into another time. But with that achievement came a terrible realization. The power they had created was immense, dangerous, perhaps too dangerous for anyone to possess. According to Ernetti, the Chronovisor could do more than show historical events. Under certain conditions, it could pick up private thoughts, inner experiences, the most intimate moments of human consciousness. No secret would be safe. Not personal, not political, not spiritual. They had built something that could strip away every barrier between past and present, between private and public, between the sacred and the profane. And that terrified them. So what did they see with this device? If you could look at any moment in history, where would you point it first? For Ernetti and his team, the answer was obvious. They were Catholic priests and scientists working for the Vatican. Their first target would be the foundational events of their faith. Ernetti claimed he witnessed the life and death of Jesus Christ. The Last Supper, the trial, the crucifixion itself. He described details. The agony on Christ's face, the crowd, the words spoken. Everything matching the biblical account. If true, it was proof, scientific proof, of the most sacred events in Christian history. But the Chronovisor's capabilities extended far beyond biblical times. Ernetti said they observed speeches by Marcus Tullius Cicero in ancient Rome, one of history's greatest orators, brought back to life on a flickering screen. They watched scenes from the Roman Empire, its rise, its glory, its decline. They allegedly viewed Napoleon addressing his armies, Mussolini during World War II. The device could hop through time with astonishing ease. One day showing ancient Rome, the next day the battlefields of the 20th century. One of the most intriguing claims involved a lost work of literature. The Roman poet Quintus Ennius wrote a tragedy called Thyestes around the 2nd century BCE. Only fragments survived through the millennia. Ernetti claimed he used the Chronovisor to watch a performance of the play in 169 BC. He said he transcribed it as it unfolded on the screen. If true, this would be an unprecedented archaeological achievement. Technology outmaneuvering time and decay, plucking a piece of culture from oblivion. Ernetti presented a full Latin text of Thyestes as proof, but proof, as it turned out, would be the Chronovisor's undoing. When Ernetti's story broke in 1972, he offered two pieces of evidence, a photograph and a manuscript. The photograph showed the face of Christ on the cross, the image the magazine had published, the one that had caused such a sensation. But almost immediately, skeptics noticed something. The image looked familiar. Too familiar. Within months, investigators found the source. A wooden carving of Christ from a church in Umbria. Made in 1931, 40 years before Ernetti's story, side by side. The carving and the photograph were virtually identical. the Chronovisor image appeared to be nothing more than a reversed photograph of existing artwork. It was a devastating blow. The proof that was supposed to validate the Chronovisor instead exposed it as a fraud. Ernetti claimed he never provided the photograph, that someone else had sent it to the magazine anonymously, but the damage was done. The manuscript of Thyestes fared no better under scrutiny. Classical scholars examined it. Linguists analyzed the Latin, and they found problems. Serious problems. The text was far too short. 1/10 the length of what an authentic tragedy from that era should be. Worse, it contained anachronisms, words and phrases that didn't exist in Latin of Ennius's time. Linguistic constructions that would only appear centuries later. It was as if someone with a limited knowledge of ancient Latin had written it. Not a genuine 2nd century BCE playwright. The academic community dismissed it as a hoax, a pious forgery, perhaps created by Ernetti himself. Confronted with this evidence, Ernetti retreated. He stopped providing proof, stopped giving interviews. The man who had made such extraordinary claims suddenly went silent, and the Vatican, which had allegedly funded the entire project, said nothing. The Church's silence was deafening. No confirmation, no denial, no comments whatsoever. But according to Ernetti, the Vatican had already intervened. Years before the story became public, he claimed that once the Chronovisor was perfected, Church authorities ordered it dismantled. They feared the device could be misused, that it posed dangers too great to allow it to exist. The machine was supposedly taken apart and placed in storage, deep in the Vatican's secret archives, that legendary labyrinth beneath Vatican City, where ancient manuscripts and sensitive documents are kept away from the world. Whether this is true, no one can say. The Vatican has never acknowledged the Chronovisor's existence, but there are hints, clues that suggest the Church took the matter seriously. In 1988, the Vatican issued a decree. Anyone using a device capable of recording the words of a confessor during confession would face excommunication. The language was aimed at preventing people from taping confessions with hidden devices, a real concern as technology advanced. But conspiracy theorists noticed something. The phrase "by means of any technical device" seemed broader than necessary, almost as if it could include a time viewing machine. The timing was curious. 15 years after Ernetti's revelations, was the Vatican warning people not to use something like the Chronovisor to intrude on past confessions? Church officials never mentioned the Chronovisor. The connection could be coincidence, but to those who believe in cover-ups, it felt like a coded message, proof that the Church knew about the device and was ensuring it stayed buried. There are other stories, whispers that have circulated for decades, tales of missing people connected to the Chronovisor, members of Ernetti's team who supposedly disappeared or were silenced. An Italian electronics engineer who allegedly bragged about working on a device for viewing history, who was then transferred to a distant post and never spoke of it again. Jesuit priest-scientists close to Ernetti's research who vanished from public life after 1973, rumored to have been sent to a remote monastery under a vow of silence. These stories cannot be verified. The individuals are unnamed or identified only by pseudonyms, but they contribute to the sense that something was being covered up, that powerful forces moved to suppress the truth. The most dramatic whisper involves an anonymous letter that surfaced in the 1990s, allegedly written by someone who worked in the Vatican archives. The letter described a hidden chamber behind heavy iron doors, where the dismantled components of the Chronovisor were kept. Inside, the writer claimed, were reels of film and stacks of photographs, labeled with dates and locations, the actual recordings of history that Ernetti's team had made, a logbook with entries referencing viewing sessions. Judea, April 14th, 33 AD Rome, May 12th, 169 BC. The dates of Christ's crucifixion and the performance of Thyestes. The letter's author said they felt compelled to leak this information, that the world had a right to know, but they also expressed fear for their safety. The letter ended with a chilling note. They will deny this, and I expect to disappear before I can offer proof. But the truth is here, hidden under Vatican City, true or not. The letter fueled new speculation, new theories about what the Vatican might be hiding. Father Francois Brune remained one of the few public defenders of Ernetti's story. The French priest who first learned about the Chronovisor insisted it was real until his death in 2019. Brune wrote books about it, gave interviews, argued passionately that Ernetti had been telling the truth. He claimed that any so-called confession from Ernetti was fabricated, that the church had pressured him to recant, that powerful forces wanted the story suppressed. But there's another account. A letter allegedly from Ernetti's relative, revealed in 1997. According to this letter, Ernetti confessed on his deathbed in 1994. He admitted the photograph and the manuscript were fakes. He said he felt pressured to provide proof and resorted to creating evidence when the real device couldn't be produced. But crucially, according to this account, Ernetti maintained that the Chronovisor itself was real. Only the evidence was fabricated. To conflicting narratives. Did Ernetti admit it was a hoax? Or did he die affirming the Chronovisor's reality? We may never know. What we know is that by the mid-1970s, the scientific community had written off the Chronovisor as fantasy. The photograph was discredited, the manuscript deemed inauthentic. No physical evidence was forthcoming. In the eyes of skeptics, the case was closed. A modern myth, a tall tale that got out of hand. Yet the story refused to die, perhaps because there's something deeply compelling about it. The idea that time could be conquered, that history could be witnessed rather than merely read about. The Chronovisor speaks to a fundamental human desire, to know, to see with our own eyes, to transcend the barriers of time and mortality. And perhaps that's why the Vatican, whether the story is true or not, would have reason to suppress such a device, because some truths, once seen, cannot be unseen. The past holds dark moments alongside glorious ones, secrets that were meant to stay buried. A device that could expose everything would be the ultimate threat to authority, to the church, to governments, to anyone who has ever tried to control history's narrative. Scientists tell us the Chronovisor is impossible, that the past doesn't broadcast signals we can tune into with antennae and dials. Every serious investigation concludes that no physical evidence exists, that the simplest explanation is that Ernetti invented the story, a hoax, perhaps a psychological experiment gone wrong. But consider this, the government conducted secret experiments for decades that sounded like science fiction. MKUltra, remote viewing programs, projects that were denied for years before finally being acknowledged. Is it so impossible that the Vatican, with its vast resources and centuries of secrets, could have attempted something similar? Is it impossible that a device was built, tested, and then locked away because its power was too great? Or perhaps the truth is simpler. Perhaps Ernetti believed he had created something real. Perhaps he saw patterns in static and convinced himself they were windows to the past. Perhaps he was a man of faith who wanted so desperately to prove the events of the Bible that he created evidence when reality failed to cooperate. We may never know which version is true. What we know is that the story endures. More than 50 years after the magazine article, decades after Ernetti's death, the Chronovisor has inspired books, documentaries, endless speculation. It has become a modern myth, a legend of forbidden knowledge and hidden power. And the Vatican remains silent, neither confirming nor denying, keeping its secrets as it has for 2,000 years. In Latin, Chronovisor means time viewer. But time is jealous of its secrets. It keeps them locked away, hidden from the prying eyes of mortals who dare to look back. Perhaps the Chronovisor existed. Perhaps it's still hidden somewhere beneath Vatican City, dismantled and locked away, waiting. Or perhaps it never existed at all, except in the imagination of a brilliant, curious priest who dreamed of seeing what no man should see. Either way, The question remains, if you had a device that could show you any moment in history, would you dare to use it? And if you did, could you handle what you might see? Some truths are meant to stay buried. Some doors are meant to stay closed. Some secrets are meant to remain in the past, where they belong. The Vatican knows this. Whether the Chronovisor is real or myth, the Church understands the danger of looking too closely at history. Because once you see the truth, you cannot unsee it. Once you open Pandora's box, you cannot close it again, and so the Chronovisor remains what it has always been. A mystery, a whisper, a story told in hushed tones about a machine that may or may not exist, a device that allegedly fooled no one, or perhaps fooled everyone. The corpse that fooled Hitler was real. The secret experiments of MKUltra were real. The hidden archives of the Vatican are real. Perhaps the Chronovisor is real too, hidden away, waiting for the day when humanity is ready to face the full truth of its past. Or perhaps it's just a story, a beautiful, terrible story about the limits of knowledge and the price of curiosity. Either way, somewhere in the Vatican, behind locked doors and ancient walls, there are secrets, and one of them might be a machine that views time itself. The time machine the Vatican doesn't want you to know about, whether it's real or not. The mystery endures, and that, perhaps, is exactly how they want it. But there's more to this story, details that emerged only years later, connections that suggest the Chronovisor, if it existed, was not an isolated project. In the 1950s, when Ernetti claimed to be building his device, the world was obsessed with time, not just metaphorically, literally. The Cold War had transformed science into a race. Every breakthrough, every discovery, was a potential weapon, a tool for gaining advantage over the enemy. And both sides were exploring ideas that seemed like science fiction. The United States had begun experiments in remote viewing, trying to train psychics to see distant locations, to spy on Soviet installations, with nothing but the power of the mind. The Soviets were conducting their own research into psychic phenomena, telepathy, precognition, the ability to influence matter with thought alone. These programs were real. Declassified documents proved they existed. Money was spent. Scientists were recruited. Experiments were conducted. Most of it failed, but not all of it. And if governments were seriously investigating the paranormal, trying to bend the rules of space and consciousness, why not time? The Chronovisor fits perfectly into this context, a Cold War arms race that extended beyond missiles and bombs into the realm of the impossible. What if Ernetti's project was part of something larger? What if the Vatican was not just pursuing religious validation, but strategic advantage? Consider the implications. A device that could view any moment in history would be the ultimate intelligence tool. You could watch your enemies past, learn their secrets, discover their weaknesses. You could observe the private meetings of world leaders, the planning of military operations, the signing of treaties. Everything that was ever said or done would be accessible. In the hands of the Vatican. Such a device would provide unprecedented leverage. The Church has always been a political power, not just a spiritual one. Information is currency in the world of diplomacy and statecraft, and the Vatican has always been good at keeping secrets. There's another angle to consider, one that's rarely discussed but impossible to ignore. What if the Chronovisor showed something that contradicted official church teaching? Imagine the device being tuned to watch the crucifixion, the resurrection, the other miracles described in the Bible. What if what they saw didn't match the scriptures? What if the historical reality was different from the religious narrative? This would be catastrophic for the Church. Faith would be shaken. Authority would crumble. 2,000 years of doctrine would be called into question. Perhaps this is why the device, if it existed, was dismantled and hidden, not because it was dangerous in the hands of others, but because it was dangerous to the Church itself. Better to bury the truth than to risk destroying the faith of millions. Father Brune hinted at this in some of his later interviews. He suggested that the Chronovisor showed things the Vatican didn't want to acknowledge, things that complicated the simple narrative the Church had maintained for centuries. He never specified what those things were, but the implication was clear. Some historical truths are incompatible with religious orthodoxy, and when faith and fact collide, institutions like the Vatican will always choose to protect the faith. There's also the question of what else the Chronovisor might have revealed. If it could view the past, could it view the future? This is where the story becomes even stranger. Ernetti never explicitly claimed the device could see forward in time. His descriptions always focused on historical events, the past, but Father Brune, in one of his final interviews before his death, made a cryptic statement. He said the device was dangerous, not just for what it revealed about the past, but for what might be seen in times yet to come. He didn't elaborate. He said he wasn't at liberty to discuss details, but he warned that the implications were profound. Could the Chronovisor predict the future? Could it show events that hadn't yet occurred? From a physics standpoint, this seems even more impossible than viewing the past. The future doesn't exist yet. There are no electromagnetic traces to detect, no signals to tune into, but perhaps the device could extrapolate, analyze patterns in the past and project them forward. Not true prophecy, but sophisticated prediction based on historical data. Or perhaps, if the device truly worked on principles we don't understand, it accessed something beyond our conventional understanding of time, a dimension where past, present, and future exist simultaneously. This is the realm of theoretical physics, of concepts like the block universe, where all of time exists at once, and our experience of moving through it is an illusion. If such theories are true, then a device like the Chronovisor becomes theoretically possible. Not easy, not simple, but not impossible. And if the Vatican had access to such a device, if they could see the future as well as the past, what might they have learned? Did they see the scandals that would rock the Church in the decades to come? The abuse cases, the financial corruption, the erosion of faith in the modern world? Did they see the rise and fall of communism, the attacks of September 11th, the technological revolution that would transform human society? If they did they try to change anything? Or did they realize that the future, once seen, was immutable? That knowledge of what's to come doesn't grant the power to prevent it. These are questions without answers, speculation built on speculation. But they're the questions that emerge when you follow the Chronovisor story to its logical extremes. Let's return to the evidence, or rather, the lack of it. In all the decades since Ernetti's revelation, no one has produced a single component of the Chronovisor, no schematic, no photograph of the device itself, no testimony from any of the alleged 12 scientists who worked on it. This absence is damning. In the modern world, secrets don't stay hidden forever. Documents leak, whistleblowers come forward, physical evidence surfaces. Yet with the Chronovisor, there's nothing, only the testimony of one man, some dubious evidence that was quickly debunked, and the support of a handful of believers. Skeptics argue this is conclusive proof of a hoax. If the device existed, something would have survived, some trace, some fragment. But believers counter with a different argument. They say the very absence of evidence proves how effective the cover-up has been, that the Vatican, with centuries of experience in keeping secrets, was able to erase every trace of the project. It's an unfalsifiable argument. The lack of evidence becomes evidence itself. The silence becomes proof of the conspiracy. This is the problem with stories like the Chronovisor. They exist in a space where faith and skepticism talk past each other, where every piece of missing evidence can be interpreted in opposite ways. To the skeptic, the lack of proof means the story is false. To the believer, the lack of proof means the story is true but suppressed. Both interpretations are consistent with the available facts. Both are internally logical. Neither can be definitively proven. And so the mystery persists. But there are some pieces of the puzzle that deserve closer examination, details that don't fit neatly into either the skeptical or the believing narrative. Father Ernetti was a real person, a respected scholar, a man with legitimate credentials and a reputation to protect. Why would such a man risk everything to promote a hoax? What would he gain? He didn't seek fame or fortune from the Chronovisor story. He gave only a handful of interviews. He didn't write books or go on lecture tour. He lived quietly as a monk until his death. If it was a hoax, it was a remarkably restrained one. Most hoaxers seek attention. Ernetti seemed to avoid it. This doesn't prove the Chronovisor was real, but it suggests that Ernetti believed it was real, that he genuinely thought he had discovered something profound. Perhaps he was deluded. Perhaps years of trying to prove his theories led him to see patterns where none existed, to interpret random noise as meaningful signals. This happens in science. Researchers become so invested in a hypothesis that they unconsciously bias their observations to support it. They see what they want to see. Could Ernetti have convinced himself that his device worked, that the static on the screen was actually showing him ancient Rome, that the garbled audio was the voice of Cicero? It's possible. Self-deception is a powerful force, especially when combined with deep faith and the desire to prove something sacred. But there's another possibility, one that reconciles some of the contradictions. What if Ernetti did build something, not a true time viewing machine, but a device that appeared to work, something that produced results that seemed meaningful but were actually artifacts of the equipment itself? Early television and radio technology was full of strange phenomena: ghost images, phantom signals, interference patterns that created the illusion of structure where none existed. The human brain is wired to find patterns, to see faces in clouds, to hear voices in static. What if the Chronovisor was sophisticated enough to produce complex patterns of light and sound, and Ernetti's mind interpreted those patterns as historical scenes? He would have genuinely believed he was seeing the past. The experience would have been real to him, but it would have been an illusion created by his own perception, not by actual signals from ancient times. This explanation accounts for both Ernetti's apparent sincerity and the complete lack of verifiable results. He wasn't lying, he was mistaken. It also explains why he might have fabricated the photograph and manuscript. When the device failed to produce clear, unambiguous evidence, he felt compelled to create some, not out of malice, but out of desperation to prove what he genuinely believed was true. This is perhaps the saddest version of the story: a brilliant man, consumed by a beautiful idea, unable to accept that it didn't work, creating false evidence not to deceive others, but to convince himself. Yet even this explanation has problems. It doesn't account for the Vatican's alleged involvement, for the funding, for the silencing of Ernetti after the story broke. If the Chronovisor was simply a failed experiment, why would the Church react so strongly? Why not just admit the project didn't work and move on? Unless there was something else, something about the project that the Vatican wanted to keep hidden. Even if the device itself was a failure, perhaps the project revealed something unintentionally. Perhaps, while trying to view the past, the researchers discovered something about the nature of time or consciousness that the Church found troubling. Or perhaps the project was cover for something else entirely, a legitimate scientific endeavor that needed to be hidden, disguised as a fantastical time machine that no one would take seriously. Intelligence agencies have used this tactic before. Release a story so absurd that serious investigators dismiss it immediately, while the real secret remains hidden underneath. Could the Chronovisor story be a smokescreen, a deliberate distraction from whatever was actually happening in those secret Vatican laboratories? It's possible, but without evidence, it's just another theory among many. What we're left with is a story that refuses to resolve, that generates more questions than answers, that sits at the intersection of science, faith, and mystery in a way that makes it impossible to fully accept or reject. The Chronovisor may have been a hoax, it may have been a delusion, it may have been a failed experiment, it may have been a cover story for something else, or it may have been exactly what Ernetti claimed it was. We don't know. And unless the Vatican opens its archives completely, unless someone comes forward with physical evidence, we may never know. But the story itself has power. It speaks to something deep in human nature, the desire to transcend our limitations, to overcome the barrier of time, to see with our own eyes rather than trust the accounts of others. History is written by the victors, as the saying goes. But what if we could bypass the writers entirely? What if we could watch history unfold without the filter of human interpretation? That's the promise of the Chronovisor: perfect knowledge, unmediated truth, access to reality as it actually was, not as we've been told it was. And that promise is why the story endures, why it refuses to die despite the lack of evidence, why new generations discover it and wonder if perhaps, just perhaps, it might be true, because we want it to be true. We want to believe that time can be conquered, that the past isn't lost forever, that truth can be known with certainty. The Chronovisor offers that hope, even if it's a false hope, even if it's just a story. And maybe that's enough. Father Pellegrino Ernetti died in 1994. He was 69 years old. He spent his final years in relative obscurity, rarely speaking about the device that had once made him famous. Did he take secrets to his grave? Did he die knowing the truth about the Chronovisor? Whatever that truth might be, we'll never know for certain. The conflicting accounts of his final words ensure the mystery continues. But this much is true: he spent his life in service to the Church. He was a scholar, a musician, a priest, and for a brief moment, he was the keeper of one of the most astonishing claims in modern history. Whether he was a visionary or a fraud, a genius or a madman, he left behind a legacy that continues to fascinate decades after his death: the Chronovisor. The time machine the Vatican doesn't want you to know about, real or imagined, fact or fiction, hidden away in secret archives, or never existing at all. The answer remains locked away, perhaps in the Vatican vaults, perhaps in the past itself, perhaps nowhere at all. And so the mystery endures, a whisper across the decades, a question without an answer, a door that remains forever closed, or perhaps only waiting for the right moment to open. After all, if time can be viewed, if the past and future are accessible, then every secret will eventually be revealed, every truth will come to light, every mystery will be solved. We just have to wait, and time, as always, will tell. But waiting isn't easy, especially when the questions are so profound. In the years since Ernetti's death, technology has advanced in ways that would have seemed like magic in the 1950s. We carry devices in our pockets more powerful than the computers that sent men to the moon. We can communicate instantly across the globe. We can access the sum of human knowledge with a few keystrokes. Yet we still cannot see into the past, not in the way Ernetti claimed to. Or can we? Consider what we already do. Archaeologists use ground-penetrating radar to see ancient structures beneath the earth. Astronomers use telescopes to observe light from stars that died millions of years ago. We're literally looking back in time with every glance at the night sky. Forensic scientists can reconstruct crimes from decades past using DNA and digital analysis. Historians piece together lost languages and forgotten civilizations from fragments and traces. We're constantly finding new ways to recover information that seemed lost forever. New techniques to peer into the past. Perhaps Ernetti was simply ahead of his time. Perhaps the technology he imagined will eventually become real, just not in his lifetime. Or perhaps it already exists, in forms we don't recognize. Classified projects in government laboratories, black budget programs that won't be revealed for decades. After all, the internet was a military project before it became public. GPS was classified for years. Stealth technology was denied and ridiculed before it was finally acknowledged. How many other technologies are being developed in secret right now? How many impossible things are quietly becoming possible behind closed doors? The Chronovisor may have been fantasy in the 1950s, but in the 21st century, with quantum computers and AI, with technologies that manipulate matter at the atomic level, perhaps the impossible is becoming merely difficult. And if such a device could be built today, who would build it? Who would control it? And what would they do with it? These are the questions that make the Chronovisor story more than just historical curiosity. It's a cautionary tale for our present and future, because whether or not Ernetti's device was real, the idea behind it is powerful, and ideas have consequences. Somewhere, someone might be trying to build a new chronovisor, using modern technology, attempting to achieve what Ernetti claimed he had achieved. And if they succeed, the world will change. Privacy will become obsolete. History will be rewritten. Every secret ever kept will be exposed. The question isn't whether such a device is possible. The question is whether we're ready for it if it becomes possible. Ernetti understood this. It's why, according to his account, he allowed the Vatican to dismantle the machine. He saw the danger. He recognized that some powers are too great for humanity to possess. Or perhaps he never understood it at all. Perhaps he was so focused on proving his theory that he never considered the implications, and the Vatican had to step in to protect not just the Church, but the world. Either way, the lesson remains. Knowledge is power, but power without wisdom is dangerous. The chronovisor, real or imagined, represents the ultimate knowledge, the ability to see everything, to know everything, to have no secrets hidden from view. And perhaps that's why it had to be hidden, or why it had to remain a myth. Because humanity isn't ready for that level of truth. We can barely handle the truths we already have. The historical facts we know cause endless debate and conflict. Imagine if every event in history could be witnessed directly. Would it settle disputes or create new ones? Would it bring peace or chaos? These are the questions that haunt the Chronovisor story. The reason it continues to fascinate and disturb in equal measure. Father Ernetti may have been a fraud. He may have been a visionary. He may have been a man who glimpsed something real and then spent the rest of his life trying to prove it, even resorting to deception when the truth proved elusive. But his story asks us to consider what we would do with perfect knowledge of the past, whether we would use it wisely, whether we could handle the responsibility. And it asks us to consider what institutions like the Vatican, like governments, like those in power, would do with such a device. Would they use it for truth and justice, or would they use it for control? The answer, if we're honest, is probably both. And that's precisely why such a device must remain hidden, or must remain a myth. Because in the wrong hands, or even in the right hands used wrongly, a window into all of time would be the ultimate weapon, the end of privacy, the end of personal freedom, the end of every mystery, every secret, every protected truth. And so perhaps the greatest service Father Ernetti performed, whether his device was real or not, was to show us what we should fear, what we should guard against, what powers we should be wary of pursuing. The chronovisor is a warning, a reminder that some doors should stay closed, some questions should remain unanswered, some powers should never be unleashed. And as we stand on the edge of technologies that seem increasingly miraculous, as artificial intelligence and quantum computing and bioengineering push the boundaries of what's possible, we should remember the lesson of the chronovisor. Just because we can do something doesn't mean we should. Just because knowledge is within reach doesn't mean we're ready for it. The past holds its secrets for a reason. The future hides itself for a reason. Time flows in one direction, and perhaps that's by design. A protection, a mercy. To break that flow, to tear down the barriers of time, would be to unleash something we might never be able to control. Father Ernetti claimed he saw that danger. That's why, in his telling, the chronovisor was dismantled, hidden, protected from those who would misuse it. Whether that story is true hardly matters anymore. What matters is the idea, the recognition that some knowledge comes at a higher price. The Vatican, keeper of secrets for 2 millennia, understands this. Whether or not they possess a time-viewing machine, they understand the value of mystery, the necessity of things unknown. And so the chronovisor remains where it has always been, in the realm of possibility, in the space between fact and fiction, in the shadows where truth and legend blur together. A machine that may have existed, that may exist still, that may never have existed at all. But whose story will endure, because it speaks to something eternal, our desire to transcend time, and our fear of what might happen if we succeed. The time machine the Vatican doesn't want you to know about, real or myth, hidden or imagined. The answer remains sealed, as perhaps it should be, forever.